AOP Tech is pleased to present the TerraNova series. In this edition, teacher logins and a guide for accessing the data reports, presented by Sister Edward William Quinn, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
Good morning or afternoon, whichever it is, teachers. I'm going to share with you today how to get into the CTB online reporting system and share with you how you can access the data that will really help you with understanding the scores and with understanding what it is you need to do to share the students' information accurately with their parents and with the community. And also how to share this data with your colleagues so that as a school you'll be able to develop school goals based on what we're finding out through the system. First thing you need to do is to log in. Your principal should have given you your username and your password. So I'm going to log into one school. For demonstration purposes, I'm using a school that has closed, so I'm not accessing anybody's current records. But just so for demonstration purposes, you will have something to work with. Your password that your administrator should have given you should be placed in the next area, but you have to be careful because the password itself is case sensitive. When you put the password in, the password is case sensitive. And I've recommended to the principals that they use a variety of letters, numbers, and symbols for the password, but it's very important that you make sure that you write your password down somewhere that you're going to find it. We do have the ability to change a password. Your administrator can change the password if you do forget it. But one of the things I need to alert you to the fact, if you don't use the program for a long time, your password is going to expire. So it's important that you log in to the program every once in a while. And I think every good teacher would do that just to check and see how they can work with their children. For example, if I'm teaching math and I'm beginning to teach fractions, I want to go back to my CTB, I want to go back to my testing data to see, well, how did they do in fractions in their last test? What are the things I need to be alerted to? So using the data on a regular basis would be helpful. So I'm going to put a password in, and I'm going to log into the program. And when I do, I get a screen that looks like this, and it's safe. I've already read this. It's safe to say that you can agree to that. And you get what is known as the home screen. The home screen has all of the, it's like the index for a filing cabinet. It has the initial access to everything that you want to do on the program. Now the first thing that you want to be aware of is that in the home screen, the first thing you're going to look for is the type of exam that's being used. We use 3 types of tests in the Archdiocese. The one that in the drop-down menu here, the one that's first is the complete battery. That's if someone in your school in the kindergarten level has taken a test. In this school, we see that there was one that took, one class took the complete battery, so the kindergarten did take a test there. However, if I was in 1st and 2nd grade, I would click on multiple assessments for 1st and 2nd grade, and for 3rd grade through 8th grade, Common Core Within View, which is the achievement test as well as the ability testing. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to use the one that's most extensive, which is Common Core Within View, and I'm going to leave that clicked for now. The next part of the home page is, well, what type of report do I want? The initial report that you would get would be the summary report. It's important, teachers, that you understand there are several different types of data that we can access through the TerraNova. The first type of data that we generally look at is the norm reference data. It's the data that compares our students to other students who have taken the test, and that's generally in the summary report. When we look at the summary report with objectives, though, we're looking at criterion reference data, which, to my way of thinking, is the data that's going to help us to improve instruction, because I'm looking at the skills that the students have been tested on and how well they perform in relation to the skills. And I'll go through each of these areas in a minute. Then we have an item summary, which takes me step by step through every question in the test so I can see how well the students perform in relation to that. In the second column is the in view, and that's the ability testing. Now you notice as I'm hovering over each thing, it gives you a brief, for example, when I go hover over summary report in view, it gives me a brief explanation. It provides the summary results for in-view subtests and composites by grade. I come over here to individual profile report, and it tells me that it's providing detailed individual profiles of the subtests and the objectives for each student. So it gives me, anytime I hover over something, it will open an explanatory window telling me what the test is or what the report is, which I find very, very beneficial rather than having to go through each one step by step to find out what I want. In the next section, it says test date, and again you have a drop-down menu. We're very fortunate now that we are 5 years into the program. So for each report we can do 5, we can backtrack at 5 years. The latest that is up is last year's. The new data should be up shortly. So we have different sets of data. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to use the last set of data that's there, which is 2016. And the next drop-down menu is the grade level. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to go right to the middle, which is grade 5. Okay? And you notice that the things here were changing as I was changing grade 5. If I change it to grade 6, I would get another drop-down menu down here, which gives me a different class. Now, when I do this, okay, the things that I'm going to work with are in the right-hand box. Automatically, by default, it puts your school in the right-hand box. Now, if I wanted to compare your school scores to the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, I click on Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, I move over to the right by clicking that right arrow. Now, if you see a second Philadelphia, the second Philadelphia would be the city of Philadelphia. In this case, I have a Bucks County school, so I'm going to click Bucks and move that over. So I want to compare Philadelphia, Bucks County, and my school. Okay, I might want to move the grade level over. If I had several classes of a grade, I would move the grade level over. So now I have 4 sets of comparative data. When I have that set up, I just click Continue. And in clicking Continue, I get my first set of data. And when you look at that set of data, you see that I'm comparing Philadelphia Bucks grade 5 and the individual school. When I hover over again, just as I did on that home page, anytime I hover over anything that's abbreviated, it gives me an explanation of what it is. NT, number tested, scaled score, national percentile. etc. Now, you notice when this came up, the only thing that it showed up was reading, language, and mathematics. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I know I gave a test in science, I gave a test in social studies. Where are they? Where's my total score? That's where the tabs at the top are important. And I'm going to go through the most important tabs with you in this demonstration. I'm not going to do the first one right now. I'll come back to that because I think the most important one right now is to look at the stats. This is like a filing cabinet that I can take and pull out the second drawer and reorder my information. So if I click on the Stats tab, I come up with a piece of information that tells me how I can identify what it is I want. Now, the first thing I would do would be to go right down the column and click on make sure I want reading, English language, arts, language, math, total score, science, and social studies. Now, if I were to work with that, when I clicked on submit, just to show you what would happen, that's an awful lot of data. And if I look at that data, you notice that I have to scroll way across to get all that data in. But there's some data there I don't really need. So I'm going to go back up to that stats column. And this time I'm going to look and think, do I need to know the number tested? No, I really don't. So I'm going to unclick that column. Take that part out of there. Number tested with accommodations. For the report I'm working on, no, I don't need that. Okay? So I'm going to take that out. The mean scaled score. If you understand mean scaled scores, it would be very important because scaled scores show growth from year to year. But for our purposes now, until we have a better understanding of what the scaled score is and how it's used to show growth, I'm going to unclick that. Okay. National percentile, I'm going to leave in because that's the one score that we generally use for comparative normative data. Okay. The mean normal curve equivalent we should be using. But again, if you're not familiar with its purpose, this is another score that shows growth from year to year, but until you understand it, there's no sense in putting it into the data that you're looking at. So I'm going to unclick that for these purposes. Grade mean equivalent. This is perhaps the most underrepresented, the most misinterpreted score of all the data that we receive. I know from my own experience, people will say to me, my child is only in 4th grade and they scored an 8.2. They're doing 8th grade work in 4th grade. It does not mean that at all. The grade mean equivalent really means that a child scored with the, to give you an example, a child in the 4th grade who has a score of 8.3 actually handled the 4th grade material as well as an 8th grader would have handled 4th grade material. Not as well as an 8th grader would have handled 8th grade material, only as well as an 8th grader would have handled 4th grade material. So then it doesn't show that they're working above level. It shows that they have a maturity to handle that work as well as an 8th grader would handle the very same work. National quartiles, I'm going to leave that in. When do we use national quartiles? We use national quartiles when we are looking for a grant, when we're reporting for Blue Ribbon, or we are preparing reports to show how well your students have scored for a scholarship or things like that. That's where the national quartiles are very important. I use local quartiles because the Archdiocese scores very well, and how you score well within the Archdiocese, and that's what the local quartile refers to, how well you score within the Archdiocese. that percentage would be used when you're looking for Title I services or you're looking for remedial services for students. These would be represented as lower scores. So I'm going to leave those in. Now I'm going to click Submit again, and you're going to see how the data below changes because I've taken a lot of those categories out of it. It's not as long as it was, but it's still pretty long. And I'm not really happy with having to go all the way across the row with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the upper right-hand corner, and I'm going to click Transpose. It's going to change the data from that horizontal row into a vertical table that is much easier to understand. So now I've got my comparison of Philadelphia, Bucks, grade 5, and the school all in a vertical chart that is easy to look at. And again, I want to save that report so I won't have to do it again. I'm going to click on Save Report, and I'm going to save it I'm going to add a folder called My Reports, and I'm going to add the folder and save this as my overview, and click Save. So that report is always going to be here. So if I go up here and click on Saved Reports, I've got a folder that says My Reports, and Overview is here. Put that on, it's always going to come up. I can click Load the report, and it comes right up. This time I'm going back to that first test date. And this way, this is my grade 5. I want to know what these students did in relationship to the same set of data in grade 4. I don't have to go all the way out to the beginning. In grade 4, this class, it would have been 2015. I change it to grade 4, and I click Submit, and I've got the same data for this class last year. I want to check this class in grade 3. I go back to that test date, change it to grade 3, and that would have been 2014. Submit, and the program automatically transcribes the data for the same thing for grade 3. And I can go all the way back as far as it goes. Okay? And for each one, I can take a look at the data and disaggregate the data. If I wanted to take a look at the reading data, if I click on reading, it'll come up and disaggregate the data. Suppose I just want to do it by gender. If I want to see how well the boys compare to the girls, I can click on disaggregate it by gender. I get the same scores broken down as to how well the girls did compared to the boys. I have a whole different set of data. So for any one of those, I can disaggregate the data in a variety of ways just by clicking on the subject area. So you can see the variety of ways if you're looking for what your Title I students did, your students that had special accommodations. I can disaggregate the data and separate the data out in that very same way, which is one of the nice things about this program is that there are so many good hyperlinks in the program that you can utilize it in a variety of ways. Okay, so I'm going to go back out now to where I was, and I'm going to go back to my home page. And I get back to my home page by clicking on Home at the top of the page. And suppose I'm a visual learner, and I don't do too well with tables. I do better with graphs. I'm going to click on the summary report, the summary chart this time, which is the second one underneath that. I'm going to click on summary chart. I'm not going to change my data too much over here. I'm just going to click continue, and automatically I get a chart that gives me a graph, a bar graph with the exact same data. Tells me everything, comparative of the national percentiles for all of these groups. Now I'm going to come down to the school here because I want to show you some interesting things you can do. Anytime I have a graph here, when I have the graph, I can click on the graph, and again, I can take this and disaggregate it like I did before, but I can also drill it down to the roster. And I just drill it down to the roster and move over. This is the third grade, and it automatically takes me to a roster of how well the students in that class did. There's some very interesting things that you can do here when you get this class roster. Generally, when I'm looking at the class roster, I want to see, well, who did better than others. All I have to do is come over here and click on that MP, and I can sort it going in descending data. It will automatically rank the students from highest to lowest just by clicking on that MP. Okay? So I know here's my student that I need to give extra attention to. These are my students that I need to give an extra challenge to. So I've gotten immediately, I've gotten a report that tells me this is how I need to work with these students. These are the ones that need challenges. These are the ones that need remediation. Well, suppose I want to find out what this student really needs. What subject areas does a student need extra help in? Okay, so I'm looking at the roster report here, and I'm going to click on the student's name, and it automatically takes me to an individual profile for this student that gives me a clear look, skill by skill, of what the student has done well in. The student obviously likes social studies because the social studies scores are their best scores. Science and social studies does not do too well in reading or math. So again, I've got an individual profile, and the individual profile takes me also, looks at the scores, as well as I've got a profile of the in view for that student. So I know whether or not they're inclined to do quantitative reasoning, which is related to math, or if they're doing it, having difficulty with vocabulary, I can look at their ability as well, which I think is really neat. You can go from one thing to another just by clicking on the graphs that we worked with. Okay, going back here to the reports, what we've done so far has been all norm reference scoring. For purposes of improvement of instruction or purposes of improvement of student skills, though, you really want to take a look at the summary charts for objectives. The summary report for objectives will give me the tables, but if I look at the summary chart for the objectives, which I think is very important, looking at the summary chart, I'm going to take, I don't need to know what the Archdiocese did for this. I'm going to remove that. Bucks County I'm going to remove, and grade 5 I'm going to remove. Just going to work with the school itself and click continue for objectives. When I do that, I get a whole different type of chart. And you notice that the type of chart is by subject level. Right now, the first one I get by default is reading, and yet I know I've taken other tests as well. So I need, for example, if I want to look at math, I'm going to click on one of these blue tabs at the top that says Subtests, and I'm going to look at mathematics. But I also can look at report type. Personally, when I look at report type, I find looking at a histogram is much more visual than just looking at the bar chart, because the histogram puts it into categories. The histogram shows me right away who my low mastery, moderate mastery, and high mastery students are. And by hovering over these scores, and I'm looking at the math scores, I can take a quick visual right away, and I can see that here I have one student that's low mastery. Just by hovering over that, it identifies that there's one student. Well, I want to know who that student is. All I have to do is click on the box and drill to the roster in the current category, and I already know who that student is that is low mastery. But I also am looking at the data, and I look at low mastery, but I also see a little 1 there above low mastery, and that little 1 just says that the child did not attempt all the questions. So that's an indication that I need to take a look at what that child's testing skills are. Maybe they're not working as efficiently. So in addition to maybe the math skills, the child also needs some testing skills. Again, I want to know more about that child. I click on the child's name, and I get an individual profile report for the child. And I can look in the math there and see much lower than the other areas of the testing. Okay, I go back here to the profiles, and I can see, okay, I've got 5 students here that are very high. And again, this is an indication of how I can differentiate my instruction. These 5 students that need or are excellent in numbers and number relations, when I'm working with that with the other students, I can be giving them more challenging work. These 5 students are ones that need an extra challenge. Okay. Get to roster. These 5 students need an extra challenge, so this is where I might take these students and put them on a program on the computer while I'm working individually with another group. They can be challenged to be doing something like first in math, or they could be challenged to be doing something else that would extend their learning. Now, I look at those 5 students, and I go back to my scores. Are they the same 5 students that are in this category? This time I have 6 students. So I've added a student in this category. So not all categories are going to be the same. Again, here's differentiated instruction. I see who has capability and who has weaknesses in any one skill that I can do some intense work with, or who I need to challenge. And again, this is where we take a look at the programs we have, we take a look at the instructional pieces that we're using, and see where we need to reach out to these students. The students who are in the middle area, these are your moderate mastery students, and again, I can take a look and see how well they've done. I can click on this student and see, well, they didn't do too well in this particular category of math, which is computation and estimation. And I'm going to take a look and see, well, computation and estimation was just moderate mastery, but do they have some areas that are high mastery? This child, obviously, geometry and spatial sense was one of their greatest areas. So if I'm trying to remediate computation and estimation, I might want to do it in the context of geometry and spatial sense, because geometry and spatial sense is an area where they're doing much better in. So you can derive a lot from these from the scores that you're getting. Okay. Okay. Now, what I've shared with you so far is taking a look at the difference between the norm reference and the criterion reference scores. Now, just as I did with the norm reference scores, I can take this class back a year to when they were in second grade, or if I want to go back into 2013, this is third grade. Let's see if they didn't take the test in 2013. But if we were if I were in grade 5, I could take it back to grade 4, 3, and see if the same students were a week before in those same skills. I move this up to grade 7 for demonstration purposes. Here's my grade 7. Okay, look at grade 7 as compared to what you were doing in grade 4. See how these students look at your high mastery. We moved from 33% in grade 3 and now in grade 7, which shows along the line something has improved. But now this grade 7, in 2016, we're at the 66% we're at a high mastery level. Let's take a comparative look, and let's look at grade 1 grade below, which is grade 6, and submit. Okay. Pretty close to where they were before. Let's go back 1 year. Okay. And what I would look at would be, when I open these rosters, see if they are the same students that are performing as well in these groups. Okay? You notice there's a little one there. This child did very well, even though they didn't answer everything. So we have some good data there that we can work with. Another thing that it comes up with here is that you can look at this in the context of a different type of chart. You can bring up a pie chart instead of the histogram, if that's the visual that you'd like to look at. And again, it will give you the same data as the other did. Okay. Okay, now that's just taking a look at the norm reference scores and the criterion reference scores. And just as a review, the norm reference scores are used when I want to have comparative data, when I'm comparing the students to other students who have taken the test. Criterion reference scores are used when I'm looking to improve instruction or to improve students' skills. I look at the criterion reference scores. I'm going to finish with this section right now before I move on to another, but that's an important part of looking at your scores.
So AOP Tech would like to thank you for watching this video. We hope it has been helpful and informative. If you'd like to contact Sister Edward, her contact information is above. And we certainly recommend that you subscribe to AOP Tech right over there. And if you'd like to watch the next video in the series, you can find it right over there. Thank you so very much. Have a great day.